Hello and welcome to Living Philosophy major channel update. So it's been a very challenging start to the year. 2024 has not been easy, but that's also been very fruitful. So it's led to a lot of rethinking of things and a lot of decisions around changes, some of which have already been made on the channel. And so I just thought I'd kind of tune in and give the update. So now that it's all kind of come to fruition, because it's been pretty much since basically January and February were kind of write-offs. They were I was going through what I was calling at one point an existential crisis, and then I had an imposter syndrome. That's going to be a theme in the video. I've had an imposter syndrome around it being an existential crisis because I love my life, like I love my family, my friends, I love where I live, and I love the work that I do, and I feel so lucky, and yet within that there was just a lot of challenges and some things that I was rethinking and some things that I just wasn't happy with, and so it kind of, I guess it started. I went to Canada over to my brother's with my parents for Christmas, and I'd set it up so that I just had, I could have the Christmas break and just fully tune out, which is such a lovely luxury. And just in that time, I guess, got a level of distance, and then that continued in the new year. I came back, I wrote an episode and made that, and I think that was on that was the Prophet. That was the one kind of thing that emerged in that time, the bit of writing that did get done that hadn't previously been done. And then I was working on a course for in-person in Ireland, and kind of in the midst of that just kind of, already I'd had the bit of distance, the bit of insight, and that just kind of I read Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks again, and I went back through this old 6-hour talk by Brene Brown called The Power of Vulnerability, and just between those it just had me rethinking my life. So, which I always feel really fortunate for, and hence the difficulties calling it existential crisis, or the thought about calling it an inflection point. And in January I was kind of like, oh, this is good, this is going to be an evolution. Sure, there's a dip, sure, it's I'm finding it hard to write, I'm finding it hard to have motivation, but I know that I recognized the pattern, and there was a couple of dreams that were really reflecting this as well, and kind of recognizing that I was going through an evolution, and so kind of being like, okay, this is good news. But by the time February came around, I was like, oh, I really thought this would be over by now, and it's still going. And so February was kind of the month where the self-doubts, the kind of being really hard with myself, and that kind of all that kind of those negative emotions kind of came in, which are more typical of those kind of dips. So it was a challenging time, and I think we are on the way up now, which is really exciting. And it's funny, I used to have these dips all the time at the start of the channel. So every other week, I remember, just like Saturday, Sunday, Monday maybe, but usually around the Sunday when it was the 100 days and beyond. But I would just be flat out. I would just be like, oh my God, what I'm doing isn't working, what I'm doing isn't good enough, I need to make changes, this needs to be better, and dying of comparison. But in that comparison, in that research, in that kind of self-doubt, I would find, things would improve, there would be evolution. And makes me think of that episode we made recently. So Ryan Bush, if you remember that, the virtue as the secret ingredient to happiness, and an ancient new theory of happiness. In that book, Become Who You Are, Bush talks about depression as the opposite of eudaimonia, but in depression as an evolutionary strategy to withdraw into ourselves so that we don't compromise ourselves in the outside world. So it's basically damage control. It's like, hey, what you're doing isn't getting the outcomes you're expecting in the outside world. Let's kind of shut down your behavioral motivation stuff so we can go in here. Serotonin is also responsible for, serotonin being a key element in depression. Serotonin is also responsible for the structural thing of your perception and of your cognitive functions, so your cognitive channels and your perceptual channels, so they can kind of bleed through, and there could be much more of an openness to new insight, which is also why artists can often be in that down and out kind of state, and that can be a very creative place. But just when you go into these dips, it's kind of this time of, or it can be a time of transformation, and so that's kind of what they usually are for me, and recognizing it as that. So I'm grateful for that. I do feel like there's been an evolution, hence the channel update, and so I'm excited to kind of share that with you. I guess most obvious thing is you can see we've changed up the studio because part of the decision is that I want to be in the videos more again, and that had kind of tapered off, partly because I just wasn't happy with the setup. So walls have been painted, cameras have been figured out, lighting has been changed up, and shelves have been, after much labor, I'm not the best DIY person, but we got there, good at filling holes, and we're kind of in a new studio now, and we're really happy with it. So that's part of the changes. So kind of two major changes that I want to talk about that are kind of happening or will be happening with the channel. And the first of those is that there's going to be a change in content, and this is coming from quite a few places. So I was reflecting on the Why It Matters videos. So for you who were here back in 2022, you remember the cadence of videos was that I would do a video. So I think the first one I did it with was the Jordan Peterson's Shadow one. And then I did a Why It Matters. And then I did I think with the 4 quadrants, with Foucault on power, with feminism versus womanism. For each of these videos in early 2022, I was doing a Why It Matters, and I was doing the canonical video itself. And the idea of them was I'd make that piece of content to kind of stand by itself and to be a scholarly work, and then the Why It Matters is, hey, here's what I find really interesting about it, here's what I'm passionate about, here's why I think you should care about it. And one of my friends who's following the channel since the very beginning said to me at the time, he was like, oh, I wish those videos came out first, because those give me the motivation to go back and watch the other video. And it struck me at the time, but I didn't think much more of it, but it really resonates with me deeply now. And there was something in those videos, but I stopped doing them because, number one, they weren't getting, to my mind, they weren't getting enough views, so they weren't getting a lot of views, and I was like, maybe it's better for the channel if I don't. And then the second thing was they were just an odd bit of content, like they were kind of neither here nor there, so they didn't stand alone. So they were kind of part 2s, but they weren't substantive part 2s, and they could be quite improvised. And so I also wasn't sure whether they should be reintegrated into the original piece. But then my thought was always, I guess for the size that the channel was at the time, I was like, this is people's first time encountering the content. You're probably not going to want to, first time encountering the living philosophy, probably not going to be one, oh, this guy, I want to hear this random YouTuber's views on these things. I'll bet more imposter syndrome. There'll be more of that. And so I stopped. I thought I would do it for Patreon. That was kind of the plan. But then I just got caught up in the grind of YouTube, and I was like, oh I gotta make the next video, So it became more and more, I think with that decoupling, it became more, okay, I've got to go do research for this video, and then I'd finish the research, and then I'd have to start the research for the next one. So it was like a never-ending process of research. And what I found was, or what I've been reflecting on this year, is that I need, before the channel, like the way I would interact with this kind of content is I'd do my research, and then there'd be play. I'd research the prophet, and then I'd be playing around with the concept, I'd be fitting in with my own life, and I'd be mapping it over onto other ideas and other thoughts and other systems of thought. And it's just, that play is really important for me. That's actually what's super nourishing for me. Now the research and learning is always deeply nourishing, but the thing is like taking that and playing around with it and developing that. And so I guess I've realized that over time it's become more and more of a scholarly thing, and that was kind of burning me out just a little bit. And yeah, so kind of wanting to bring more play into the channel and kind of getting back to that why it matters, kind of like experimenting with ideas, playing around with ideas. And so that's something that's kind of been coming along, and another realization which kind of came out of, so something else that's been going on this year, the creator I've been obsessed with is the leftist YouTube philosopher Contrapoints, who I'll talk more about later, but one of her videos was about why she left academia. It's one of her early videos, and that really just got me thinking. That it made me realize that I have this big, this hang, or I had this academic demon living in my mind. The kind of, I guess, the curse of the dilettante. This voice in the back of my head going, this needs to be more rigorous. This needs to be better researched, and kind of imagining someone criticizing the thing as not as poorly researched or as a bad take. And so that always been the devil on my shoulder, and I feel like that was driving the content towards being more scholarly and more sterile is kind of the word I've come up with, like less, and you can kind of notice this progression of less and less talking head, like less and less of me in the video as it was becoming less and less more and more scholarly, I guess, and less alive, and less soul in it. And yeah, I don't know, maybe this is a kind of recency bias, and maybe I'm wrong in looking back that way, but definitely, yeah, I feel like there's not enough soul in it, and always something I've struggled with since the 100 days is, as I've moved into scripting rather than this more improvisational, spontaneous, like having an idea when I go in. Like at the moment, I'm using these flashcards as an experiment in liberating my, being more expressive, thinking more on the cuff, and being more present, I guess, and more soul in that showing up. And I don't know if I can do this for normal episodes. You might find this boring and rambling. Maybe it's somewhat structured, I promise, but yeah, I guess I feel like since moving off those 100 days, which were very much me just talking into the camera, and coming into the more and more researched episodes, obviously that need to research was coming in, but also I just like the laughter. Like most of my day-to-day interactions are just talking nonsense. It's just making jokes. Like I'll be talking about something serious and then undermining it with jokes, and just, yeah, so much of that side of my personality just doesn't come through, and I guess wanting to bring more of that in, not knowing how to bring more of that in, so more humor. I just feel like there's a dryness, and yeah, so I'm not sure if I have the artistic ability to bring any of that in. The thing is, I think it's that when I'm writing these scripts, I'm like in my introverted intuition, to use like Jungian Myers-Briggs kind of typological language. I'm in my dominant function, which is introverted intuition, and I'm just in my own world, and that's very serious. Whereas when I'm talking with other people, it's more in my extroverted feeling. I'm more just in that banter kind of zone, in that connecting with others. And so I think there's like a seriousness in that introverted world that's maybe just looking for the bridge between that and the external world. I don't know. So these are the kind of ruminations I've been having, and hence wanting to make some kind of changes in the content. And then some of you might remember back to the videos I made on Camino, or after Camino. Actually, it was just one video on Camino. The other one was like a history of the Camino itself, scholarly. But the previous one was kind of talking about my experience of Camino. With Camino de Santiago, which is a hike across the north of Spain. I was gone for 5 or 6 weeks hiking across the north of Spain. So like an ancient Christian pilgrimage. Wonderful. And yeah, there was a week on that hike where I was just in the zone. I'd walk for a few hours in the morning, heading, and between the setting off place and the first breakfast stop, I'd be thinking, I'd be looking around me, I'd be enjoying what's going on, I'd be thinking about where I'd stayed, I'd be thinking about what I'm going to have for my breakfast, and then there would be this flash of insight that would come through of like, hey, Gerard Turner, something like that, or what about applying Nietzsche thought to this angle? And so I just had this bubbling up of the muse. I'd get to the first stop, I'd write down, I'd flesh out that thought, and it would come in like an aphoristic form, and then I'd walk to the next place, and then another one would crop up along the way there, and I'd flesh that out. And so I just found there was very much this, I'd call it a Nietzschean creative process. I really realized that Nietzsche, that was how he wrote. He was just walking in the Alps all day, in Sils Maria in the Swiss Alps, and was just having these, he was just walking, and then these insights were coming to him. And it's just, I think it's just the mind working in the background, making connections between the things it's consumed before. And that was really, really enjoyable process. I didn't really know how to bring that process home, but the language I've come up around it is that that's like the muse versus scholarly stuff. So scholarly stuff being, okay, I'm going out, I'm researching this thing, and I'm making a report basically on that thing, and I'm doing my best to like boil it down and really make it communicable. And on the other hand, the muse is more about forming connections between things that are already out there. And now that I'm saying it, I'm thinking about episodes like The Last Man, or even the Three Metamorphoses. There was episodes where this comes out, and the leisure episode, you can kind of see that where those insights are in there, and there is that play. But yeah, so it is there in parts of the channel, but I guess wanting to emphasize that more and wanting that to be more the starting point for a lot of episodes. So the plan now is to make more of these muse episodes, which are more my connections, my thoughts, based on the inputs that I've had, and then spending a longer period of time doing a much deeper period of research. So yeah, I'm reading books on Marx. So when I got back from Camino, I read like 6 books on Marx while I was kind of decompressing before I really got back into work. And I was like, yeah, I'll make the video on Marx this month. I'll do fascism next month. I'll do neoliberalism the month after that. And it just hasn't materialized. It just got back into that grind of like researching the next video. And so now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, let's get into the muse stuff. Let's get into the gardening. Let's get into this kind of much more fluid kind of internal connections kind of creative process, this Nietzschean aphoristic kind of creative process, and then make a few of those while I'm doing the research for the big video. And so maybe it'll be every 2 months, 3 months, who knows, but I want to make a big video on Marx, and I would like there to be humor in it. I'd like to have that passion running through it, and for it to be really well animated, and for it to just be really high quality stuff, but like deeply researched. And in between that, just kind of having the nourishing thing of like exploring these different things that I'm really interested in, and kind of bringing that out. And I realized that one of the reasons maybe why I've held back from doing that is that there's a degree of vulnerability in that, where there was videos that I made like that before I went on Camino. There's one that comes to mind in particular, which was on Marx's views of the peasantry. And yeah, it was just, I just remember there was comments on that where I was like, oh, that's embarrassing that I didn't know that. And I feel kind of like exposed of my stupidity, and I can't really hide behind research when I'm making that kind of content. So I am nervous about coming across with some super amateurish takes, but at this point I'm just like, yeah, fuck it. Let's just do it. Let's just go for it. So I'm not sure that these will always be on YouTube. So yeah, I'm going to try for about 6 months, see how we get on. And if not, I'll just be doing it for Patreon in future, and then just have these big canonical, well-researched episodes on YouTube, since that tends to have been, well, with the biggest episodes, that's what's played well, but that's basically because that's mostly what I've done. So those will be the big episodes, and then yeah, maybe I'll just have the other episodes on Patreon. And yeah, so it'll take time to figure out the process, it'll take time to figure out what they are, but that's kind of the first major change, is just a pivot on the type of content that is going to be coming out of the living philosophy. And yeah, I don't think it'd be that different, but I'm just hoping that over time it'll become more enjoyable, there's more soul in it, more enjoyable for me, more enjoyable for you. This is the plan. So we'll see how we get on with that. And the second change is kind of coming on from that point, is realizing the importance of Patreon, and really wanting to focus more on that. And like I was saying with the Why It Matters videos, my intention was to put them up on Patreon, or to keep making them, but put them on Patreon. And that just never really happened because I just haven't had the bandwidth. Like, I've been so taken up with YouTube and trying to keep up with this scholarly pursuit, this trivial scholarly pursuit, and yeah, finding myself inadequate at that, and then not having the bandwidth to really focus on Patreon and to make those extra, like, the Why It Matters episodes. And so, yeah, with this realignment and this Muse thing, I just feel like, for a lot of reasons, I've got this headspace now where I'm like, yeah, Patreon is so important, and this is really so central to what I want to do. And so let's get involved in that. And I was did an interview with CJ the X last year, and it was just really inspiring to see what he's done with his Patreon community. And it's so alive, and it is a community, and I just love that. And so wanting to create more of that and kind of nurture that, and already, yeah, such a great foundation from a couple of years of having Patreon with the Living Philosophy. But yeah, a lot of the content that was going up there was really just, other than the questions and answers. And I was doing bonus episodes, but I feel like the bonus episodes weren't as researched as I want the Muse episodes to be. Anyway, but what I want to start doing is, well, we're starting a book club. So as it stands at this moment, the vote, so we had a poll this week, and it looks like the first book we're going to be reading on the Living Philosophy Patreon is Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is kind of just a classic existential thing. So we'll feel out exactly the best way to do. We'll probably learn a lot of lessons about how to do book club in doing that. But yeah, that's an exciting start. And over time, going to figure out whether we'll do a Discord just for Patreon members. And I guess we could merge that with the Substack then as well, and just kind of get really good conversations going on, more of a round circle thing than the linear thing of content and comments underneath. So maybe we could have much more of a, but one step at a time. We'll start with, book club and stuff. And did an interview with Ryan Bush last year just for patrons, and just planning more stuff like that. I just want to do more, just have more interactions, more types of content, and just figuring out what that is and how best to nurture that community. So the other thing is live stream Q&As and doing that every month, because before they've been mostly, or almost all except one, have been recorded Q&As, so there'll be questions asked in advance. But I tried one live stream one. It's just a technical thing, makes me nervous, but I think I've figured it out now, so that's going to be the case from now on. And yeah, I guess what's caused the shift towards Patreon was another big thing that happened this year, which some of you have noticed, some of you might not have noticed, but what had actually that week become the biggest video on the channel, I decided to take it down. It's the video on postmodernism and the postmodern philosophers signing this, and existential philosophers signing the petition to abolish the age of consent in France in the 1970s, which I scurrilously worded as postmodernism and pedophilia, or why they were pro-pedophilia in the 1970s, and that being kind of I wanted to give it a hand out into the world, and I think I kind of compromised it. Anyway, this is something I'm actually going to make another video about next week, talking about why I did that, kind of going in detail about the kind of ethical considerations and the personal considerations, and also why I turned off the comments on the Was Carl Jung an Anti-Semite video. So basically the comments on that postmodernism video were just, there was like 10,000 comments on it for, we'll say 1.2 million views. I think there's something like 1,000 comments, maybe 2,000 comments on the nihilism, existential absurdism one, which was also 1.2 million. So there was just like a massive amount of comments, and most of them were just quite nasty. Most of them were just like, these people should be taken out behind the shed and shot. Kind of get that. But then there was stuff like, oh, this is typical of French people, they're all pedophiles. That I wasn't so keen on. And then, there was other comments being like, look at their noses, they're all Jewish, which none of them, well, like Derrida was Jewish, but Derrida wasn't in France, he didn't sign the petition. So, I was just shit like that where it's like, is this what the massive thing of YouTube is like? And thinking about what's happened to the likes of Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand, like seeing how, like with those videos, I'm just like, oh, I see how I could make videos that could do really, really well by just leaning into that outrage porn of the algorithm. I know that I could really grow the channel, but I don't think that's what, like, so the thing with Peterson and Brand is that I feel like they've been captured by a certain portion of their audience. They've been caught in this feedback loop between them and the algorithm, and it's just gone to a really kind of place where, yeah, I feel like they've just kind of lost themselves a bit or a lot, and I don't want that to happen to me. And I could see how if YouTube was your one and only, then you'd be caught in that recursive loop and you'd be wanting more and you want more success and you want to reach more people and you can justify it as this is how you go about it. But yeah, that's not what I want to do. And so, yeah, I decided to take the video down, and I just realized, I guess, that Patreon is just such a great thing because you can have that community of people who have opted into that and who have really chosen to be part of something rather than it just being another thing that shows up on the algorithm as you're going deeper down a rabbit hole. And I was also thinking about this distinction between the exoteric and the esoteric, and this goes back to ancient Greece, and would say Plato's dialogues were exoteric writings, meaning they were meant for the general public, they were meant for outsiders, but then there was the esoteric teachings of Plato, and we kind of see Aristotle's writings are more the esoteric teachings of his school, and we don't have the exoteric ones. Although I think it was Cicero said that Plato's dialogues flow like a river of gold, of silver, whereas Aristotle's flow like a river of gold. So it seems like Aristotle wrote dialogues that were really good, but we don't have any of them. But yes, we don't have Plato's esoteric teachings, which probably would have been more like Neoplatonistic, like more spiritual and more. So it goes. So the story goes anyway. But this distinction between what you put out into the world, there's a certain assumptions and a certain way of creating that comes with that versus what you can say to those who already know. So you think of science as popular communication versus science in a scientific journal, and there's a certain amount of language and worldview that can be taken for granted and that can be built upon. There can be a progression, whereas I just feel like with YouTube there's a level of, to some extent, I can assume that you've seen previous videos, but not quite as much. So yeah, I think there's something in that as well that is appealing with Patreon, and just wanting to build a community that's greater than the sum of its parts. That's really that becomes something more. And I think that maybe the impact on YouTube can be something, but what one YouTube video versus what a whole being part of an active community just seems like. And someone mentioned the third place on the comments on the video on leisure, and the third place being we've lost. So there's the family is the first place and the workplace is the second place, but the third place being community. These places that we've kind of lost in the 21st century where people just meet up. Now we've kind of got virtual third spaces, or some people call them fourth spaces, I think, but just the sense of community and just connecting with people on a certain level. So if you think of the old cafes in France or the pub, that kind of thing, of just where people are connecting and connecting for connecting's sake. So feeling like all of this is kind of where Patreon has its appeal, and that's kind of where we want to go with it. So I mean, is there anything else to say? The point I've written down there is that there's a possibility of nuance with Patreon that is maybe harder to attain with YouTube. And I don't think, I'm being harsh on YouTube, but I guess it's just the sort of knee-jerk reaction to like those comments and to that impact, and just kind of like questioning things. So taking down that video, it obviously hurts the growth of the channel, but not in a way that I'm displeased with. And financially it's a hit, obviously, but again, because I've got that foundation with Patreon, I can kind of do it. Yeah. I can kind of do it. Or I think, yeah, integrity was kind of the thing that mattered most. It took 6 months from the video, like taking off like a rocket, for that integrity to kick in. 2 years from the release of the video, or a year and a half from the release of the video for that to kick in. But yeah, I'm not perfect. So yeah, that's, I guess that's kind of the thing is, some things matter more than others, and you got to think about the long-term thing. It kind of trumps the short-term thing when you can do it. So yeah, that's everything I want to say about the 2 major changes. So first major change in content, and second major change, much more of an emphasis on Patreon. So you'll probably see me talking about that a lot more. And yeah, I just thought I'd give a few reflections now in kind of the second half of the video on why I've made these changes, and yeah, what the reflections that kind of went into them were, and obviously I've talked about them a bit along the way there, but I guess more reflections on where I'm at and how I got here this year, and what this dip has kind of brought me. So another major thing that has happened is kind of thanks to this book here. Probably going to be blurred out because I haven't figured out the focus on the camera. It's called French Philosophy of the 60s, an essay on anti-humanism by Luc Ferry and Alain Renaud. So it's a book that I picked up in a secondhand bookshop in Toronto when I was there over Christmas, and yeah, it kind of broke the spell of postmodernism for me. So for the last couple of years, I've been really fascinated by postmodernism, by those French postmodernist thinkers, because there was such an archetypal glow to them, because there's like a deep reverence and reference to them among leftists. You can see it on their bookshelves and their videos, and you can, it's in their books, in their journals. Very much these writers are kind of often referenced. So the likes of Derrida, Foucault, Deleuze, Baudrillard, Lyotard, these thinkers are so heavily almost idolized in a way. They're like real grandfathers of the modern woke tradition, or of modern leftist academia. And yeah, so there's an archetypal thing for that, obviously, because these thinkers are held in high esteem in that tradition. And then on the other hand, you've got the likes of Peterson, James Lindsay, Stephen Hicks, these people who utterly demonize this tradition. And they don't just say, not for me. It's like they think these people are evil. Like Peterson thinks that they're trying to take over the world, or that, it's an evil, the cultural Marxist kind of theme of, we're trying to take over the world. I talked about that a lot in the video on Jordan Peterson's Shadow, but yeah, so coming from that side, it was just this thing of like, oh, these people are really fascinating, and they've got a grip on this. Like, you should hear the way Foucault or Peterson talks about Foucault. It's like he's a demon, and yeah, it's that like amplified the charge for me. And even Ken Wilber, who talks about like postmodernism is like this very highly developed state. So like it's called the green value meme in spiral dynamics, this cultural evolution thing. And so it's beyond modernism and our kind of scientific worldview. But yeah, Wilber kind of says, they've transcended and included everything that went before, but it's kind of a dead end. Whereas my thing, integral, is beyond it. So even Wilber knows more about them, but is still kind of like hitting into a wall with it, and it's kind of like, nah, it's a dead end. Which, again, just added to the fascination. And so all of this gives this great importance to them. And I think Wilber's really talking about them because they were so in vogue in academia in the 90s. But what this book does, and this is from, I think it was written in French around 1991, 92, is 1985 even. Wow. It's just the English translation was 1990. What it does is it's a criticism of the tradition, but not a criticism of the tradition in the way that Hicks or Lindsay or Peterson do. It's not a demonization. It's written by French philosophers who are steeped in this tradition. And so sections on it, they kind of identify the ideal type. They trace it all back to the 68 philosophy. So talked about 1968 in that video on postmodernism and pedophilia. I'll probably put that up on Patreon, just not on YouTube again, because it was a really good section, well researched, on 1968 there that I'd like to kind of still have out there. But yeah, so these writers identify them as the thinkers of 68, and they just kind of criticize them within a philosophical, like a philosophers disagreeing with philosophers, not leaping into demonism and also not idealizing them, just being like, here's kind of what's common between these strains. There's this Heideggerian, Nietzschean, and Marxian strains kind of coming in. And, well, they talk about structuralism as well, but it doesn't get as much attention. And yeah, they really just do a philosophical disagreement with them, and they're kind of more liberal rather than leftist philosophers, and it's just brilliant. It's just, now, I didn't understand, I understood the section on Foucault because I know a lot about Foucault, but even on Derrida, I was still like, I still don't get Derrida. And so there'll be a rabbit hole on that at some point, and it's well worth a reread, but just at the end of the book, I just kind of came away being like, okay, yeah, it's just another philosophical tradition, and it was kind of the spell was broken a bit, and so yeah, I don't really have any philosophical fascinations at the moment, so I'm kind of a bit philosophically homeless again, and that's nice. It's kind of nice to not be, so back before this channel started, I was very much in a Jungian phase, and then just as it started, I really got into an integral phase and was reading a lot of Ken Wilber and got into metamodernism, and then kind of went from seeing Wilber and Peterson's kind of like demonization of the postmodernists, kind of went off and became fascinated with them, and now just kind of feeling like, okay, what now? Like what's the next thing? And I guess the only things that I still feel drawn to metamodernism, and probably the closest thing to the way I think, or something like Ian McGilchrist with the left and right hemisphere, the master and his emissary, which I think will be getting a super long episode at some point, maybe both of his works. And yeah, just kind of, I guess there's something nice in that sort of homelessness, and yeah, because it wasn't just postmodernism, it was also just kind of leftism in general that was getting demonized, and I kind of wanted to understand it from the inside rather than this kind of outsider perspective that you were getting in, we'll say, the intellectual dark web tradition. So Peterson, the Weinsteins, all this. There was just a sort of a really outsider not really getting the woke kind of points. And I've been researching critical race theory recently, and obviously been watching a lot of Contrapoints, so getting more of the understanding of the transgender culture and just of leftist culture in general. And I really just have to say it just all makes sense to me. Now, there's still things that I disagree with, or that I don't entirely resonate with me, but with critical race theory, I'm just kind of like, of course, that makes so much sense. And same thing with most of the transgender stuff. There's obviously a lot of discussions to have around that, and it's still something evolving, but there's just a large sense where I'm just like, it's kind of the archetypal charge has gone out of it, where I'm just like, I see your points. That's good points. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of, again, something that I'm kind of over then, or not over, but like I kind of have this appreciation for that tradition, and so that I don't feel the need to go in and defend it, or the need to go in and understand it in order to kind of purge my mind of this polarization and outsider thinking. So I just kind of wanted to get an insider perspective, and yeah, you can't do better than Contrapoints for that. Laurie Penny is another fantastic leftist writer that I'd highly recommend, but Contrapoints is just, I'd watched Contrapoints before, and maybe around the time that Envy came out, and I think I'd watched her Jordan Peterson video before that, and really enjoyed her, and thought, really enjoyable kind of critique, and really good faith, and well researched. But it's somewhere in January, I just went back to like her very earliest videos, and from 2016, and I was watching them, I was just like, these are so good. It hurt, because it was just like this. It was Dionysian. It was so, there was a madness to it, or a sort of a wildness to the content. It was so Dionysian is kind of the word coming to mind. But it's so funny, so insightful, and then as the channel kind of develops and she's puts more into the production quality and kind of spends more time on the episodes, they turn into these like amazing. It's the closest thing to a platonic dialogue that I've come across since Plato. You know what I mean? I read other dialogues and but like the presentation of ideas, where you just don't know whose side she's actually on, or she just does a very good job of representing both sides so well. And it's so good. But also those early episodes are they're so funny. It doesn't have like the moral puritanism that you can often get with the left that can be kind of off-putting. It's more like a 4chan meme lord has kind of like made these videos, but they're deeply leftist. It's just a wonderful. They were so good. They are so good. So yeah, I think something that was really quite healing is the word that's coming to mind about Contrapoints, was that is you're seeing the left from the inside, and so it's not this homogenous thing that you get as an outsider. Oh, here's left wingers, or here's the alt right. You know, when you get that homogenous, it's usually a straw man when you get that. But with Contrapoints, so willing to be like, yeah, well, these people are daft, like talking about some leftists being like, of course, this is completely irrational and crazy, and kind of like holding other perspectives and wrestling them against each other, and that just being really, getting that nuance and those the gradations and seeing the diversity of the tradition. And it kind of reminded me of, just a cautionary tale that you should never take a group by their worst members. And that was something I thought about a lot whenever Jordan Peterson had that interview with Kathy Newman, and when the reaction afterwards was like massively in favor of Peterson, Channel 4 and Kathy Newman, their kind of response was, well, we're getting death threats like Kathy Newman, like we had to call the police to protect Kathy Newman, and it was a way of delegitimizing or undermining Jordan Peterson by appealing to, let's face it, that's an audience, a fan base that has a lot of scurrilous people in it. So while I think Peterson shouldn't have been reduced to his worst fans, the same thing applies to leftism. And so I think there's a sort of a midwit meme that happens where we look at the other side and we only see the daftest point of views, because that's the easiest thing to strawman and defeat the others, because it means you don't have to spend a lot of time listening and understanding their perspective. Unfortunately, Peterson has become more like the worst of his audience, and I think that kind of goes back to that audience capture idea that I was talking about with him and Russell Brand. And there's something that happens there. But I think it's just really insightful to get that inside perspective. And so something else that I got from Contrapoints that I kind of mentioned earlier was around that academic imposter syndrome, and her talking about her journey with that. And there was just one video where she's got this dialogue between one of her characters, who's called Tabby, who's like far leftist, anti-fa kind of militant, and then Justine, who's just another, who's more liberal leftist, much more centrist than, well, she's still a leftist, but much more, much less radical than Tabby. And Tabby is just like, oh, have you read Bakunin? And Justine is like, yeah. Have you read Proudhon? Yeah. Well, have you read Marcuse? And it's like, no, I haven't read. Well, you need to read Marcuse to understand. And then Contrapoints is kind of pointing out, well, if you don't, like, this is what's wrong with the left, is that it's a tradition that's so steeped in intellectualism. So there's such a rich history and diversity of PhDs and deep knowledge and readings, that there's a sense that you never know enough, and that if you haven't read all of these texts, then you don't really know what you're talking about, and you can't fully participate. And so she kind of exposed a certain elitism in that, and I think that that's been something that has been problematic in the leftist tradition for a while. I remember in I think Didier Eribon's biography of Foucault kind of talks about when around 68 and maybe it's in the early 70s, but reaching out to trade unions and trying to form a relationship between the intellectuals and the trade unions, and it just broke down. They just spoke different languages. So despite the fetishization of the working class since Marx or since the early socialists, there's this disconnect between the leftists, and again, this is like the old left. So the old left being the more economic, anti-capitalist kind of bunch, and the new left being more the gender, feminism, LGBTQI plus kind of group of things. So more like the cultural side of things rather than the systemic. Well, it's systemic in a different way, but more going after the economic, we'll say, rather than the cultural domain. And this kind of that the history of that tradition. And even I just finished reading a book about Marx, and there was this talk about this communist organization and how Engels was unanimously voted to be a leader, but they put up this, or I think Engels shares in a letter or something, but he's saying how they put forward this working class person just for good optics, and that's kind of that's always been part of the shadow of the left. And so really interesting to see that in that interaction between Tabby and Justine. And also the other thing that made me realize was I will never know enough. I kind of thought with this journey that, hey, I can just read all the postmodernists, I can read Frankfurt School, and I can really just kind of get into all of this work, and I can really understand it, and then I'd be able to speak the language and be able to I guess understand the minefield and be able to argue back against certain points. But this just that made me realize that I would never read enough, and also I'm not smart enough to read all the postmodernists in any kind of reasonable period of time. It's a very, very long digestion process in that, and there's just so much to read. And so I'm just kind of, I still want to learn so much about Derrida. I love Deleuze and I love Foucault. Again, plenty to disagree with them in, but they're very fertile thinkers. But I don't feel that pull to necessarily, that hunger or that to get to that point where I just realized that I'm never going to get to that level. And so there was sort of I was freed of a certain illusion in that. And in another one of her videos, she kind of talks why she left her PhD program, and that was kind of what got me over the PhD thing. She was talking about being in a seminar one day, and someone brought in this right-wing text, kind of like famous, kind of popular right-wing kind of text, and they just couldn't come up with good arguments against it because they weren't familiar with the arguments. You could come up with some arguments like about the tiny minutiae about, Lyotard versus Marcuse, or something like that, but tiny inflections of arguments in that. But it was like a narrow lane of training, and then being introduced to this other thing, just couldn't grapple with it as quickly. And so I guess that kind of liberated me a bit from being like, okay, I don't know, I got over my dilettante thing a little bit there. And so and the video just helped me to recognize that kind of demonic voice in me of the wanting to be, I guess, accepted or something like that by academics, and kind of feeling like that the sense of an autodidact, that the vulnerability of the autodidact. So Contrapoints really helped me kind of recognize that was actually something going on in me, because it was kind of going on under the surface, and also kind of just helped me liberate it from a bit. So really grateful for that. And I guess just seeing the level of, it's just art in the videos, just the level of like, oh my god, just what's possible, and like taking things to a different level. Sorry, got distracted by a cat there. So I guess Contrapoints just helped me realize that, kind of seeing that academic thing showing up, and then realizing does the style have become too dense, and just the level of art in her videos just inspired me to like see what's possible at a different level. Oh yeah, so I think I realized it with the profit video that it was just too much. It was I didn't have that passion coming through, and so wanting to get back to that more. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's everything kind of that has been going on in me, and all the transformations and reflections I've been having this year. It was obviously a bit meandering. Well, it was structured but meandering. So I'd be curious to hear your feedback on that. Is it easier to connect with because it's more spontaneous, or is it annoying? I don't know. I'm curious. But again, this is part of the experimentation we'll be doing over the next few months to try and just shake up how things are going and to kind of get out of that density and get more into connection and bringing soul back in. So yeah, that's just about all on the reflections. And yeah, with that, we might just end up putting this type of content just for Patreon and kind of sticking with the usual stuff in the living philosophy and just very like well-researched kind of stuff. So that might be what happens, but yeah, I highly recommend checking out Patreon. Hopefully it's going to turn into something very exciting. I'm very excited about it and incredibly grateful that it's just for all the support over the last couple of years and for making this kind of pivot possible. So been really cool. And yeah, there'll be more community over there, more content, and hopefully, anyway, you'll hear me talk about that more. But yeah, I guess that's everything that I wanted to cover on this episode. As ever, I'd like to thank wonderful patrons, David Pilabosi and Abysso Fiesa, and all the others. And yeah, if you want to get access to bonus content, get your name in the credits like these wonderful people, and get involved in book club and general community, then you can head over to Patreon. And yeah, as ever, if you have any thoughts, insights, or feedback, love to hear from you down in the comments. Otherwise, I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching.